Let's cut the bullshit. We've got straight up marketing advice. You should use it.
Just drop the job.
Adam and Simon's Bullshit Busters.
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Adam and Simon Bullshit Busters. I'm Simon Batchelor.
I'm Adam Bastock.
And in this episode, we are talking all about Google Analytics closing down and what you can use instead. So, Adam, do you want to just give us a very quick overview for those who might not be fully aware of either what Google Analytics is or what it might be doing at the moment?
Yeah, so Analytics, if you've got it installed on your website, will basically be telling you what your audience or what your viewers are doing. So in a typical day, I would use it to look at, say, the Small 99 website and see a breakdown of where users are coming from, whether they're coming from Google, are they coming from Google Ads, are they coming from YouTube, are they coming from social, and then also how much time are they spending on the site, what pages are they looking at, and this isn't relevant for us, but if you've got an e-commerce store, how much money are they spending with you, and what's the conversion rate, bounce rate, and all that stuff. So that's a very top level thing. There's a lot more you can do with it. It's quite detailed, or was rather. So this is why it's such a big topic. It's such a massive change to be ditching this and moving over to GA4. Yet I don't fully understand it. I've not looked into GA4 a huge amount, which is why I'm very pleased to be sat here talking with you to understand what I need to do about it for myself. Because current analytics is so useful for me in just dipping in and seeing what my customers or what my users are doing, that losing that's going to be quite a big impact in terms of my daily or weekly activities. So, yeah, that's what it does.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of businesses are using Google Analytics, even if they don't know they're using Google Analytics. So if you've had your website built by a reputable web design person, or you're using something like maybe Shopify, or you're using Squarespace, for example, you may have linked that with a Google Analytics account. You may just be using their own inbuilt one. But ultimately, the key here is that Google Analytics has been around for donkey's years, as long as the internet, pretty much in the largest sense of the world. And Google Analytics relies on tracking incredibly heavily what users are doing. So Google knows what someone did before they came to your website, what they did on your website, and then what they go on to do. Officially, they won't put that in quite such a short sentence, but ultimately that's where Google makes its money, is understanding everything that a user does all the time that they're active on a device. Google can then track you across device, so it knows what you're looking at, when you're looking at it, how many times you've looked at it. And what it does is it takes a portion of that knowledge and it shows it to you as the website owner.
Yeah.
So they don't show you what the user's done before, and they don't show you what the user goes on to do. They used to back in the day, but they don't anymore. And gradually, the amount of information that Google Analytics shows you comes down as privacy regulation tightens. So Google is facing a record-breaking fine, like an unbelievably big fine. And that is based on the fact that Google Analytics is illegally tracking people without their consent. Please do go and read up on that if you want to know more about it, because for libel reasons, that is one side of the story.
Yeah.
But basically, it's no coincidence that Google have gone, the best way for us to deal with this is to simply close it down. Because if we close it down, then we don't get the fine, hopefully. So what they've decided to do is to stop tracking people in that way. They've decided to move to a different tracking thing, which is called Google Analytics 4 or GA4. And what they're going to do there is, rather than tracking individuals, they're still going to do the tracking, but Google are going to keep that information. And the bit they're going to let out to you is what they're going to call in cohorts of people. So, for example, it might say, rather than saying this user came to your website and clicked this, then did this, then did this, then did this, they're going to say people who like this, hiking and outdoor walking, came to your site and did this and did this and did this. So rather than being per user, they're splitting you up into cohorts. Essentially is the kind of top level of the biggest change that's happening.
I think a good example of this kind of change really is that on a traditional e-commerce site that's got analytics installed, even though I can't exactly see the name and address of that person in analytics, I can very easily match that data up and therefore break those sort of laws by going, well, I know that my Shopify website took an order at 2 p.m. on Saturday. That was the only order I received that hour. and I can see in analytics that around 2 p.m. on Saturday, an order from this address came in, and they came in via Google Ads, and they came in and looked at these pages and all that stuff. So it's quite easy to pull those user journeys together manually if you wanted to at the minute, which you shouldn't be doing, but you can do. Whereas GA4, I believe is far more anonymized and far more built from the ground up to be that entire obfuscation of data, which is probably great news from a data privacy point of view, and it's terrible news from a marketing point of view, because suddenly you start losing all of that nitty-gritty data, which is how you're making decisions in the first place. So it's a real step change, I think, in the industry and how we're going to be able to track and just run with our websites and see what's happening with it. I say I've not looked enough into it personally to fully understand what my life will look like in that time, and like the life of looking at analytics dashboards all the time. So yeah,
I think you raise an interesting point there, because it is about the data. So the data you're getting is just changing. They're not necessarily removing the data; they're just changing how they present it.
Yeah.
So you will still see user journeys, but they won't necessarily be as easy to identify, because it's trend based, because they recognize that they can't track every user that comes to the site. They're also using this without cookies. So if you want to know more about that, do check out the video called No More Cookies, and that will tell you what they are and why they're going. But essentially, with this removal of cookies, the tracking they're able to do is weirdly even more in depth, because they no longer giving you an option to block it. It will obviously develop the ability to block it, I'm sure, which is why Google are keeping their expectation, the promises they're making, very low. So everything's cohorts, everything's trends. They're no longer saying you've had 36 people visit. It's like around 30 to 40 people have visited, and this is the user journey that this cohort took. So by doing that, they basically future-proof their product. So what does this mean for your business is obviously the next thing I think probably people watching this are thinking. It's like, okay, we get the detail, but what does this mean? Essentially, it means one of two things. One is that GA4, if you found analytics easy to use, which no one has ever said that they did, Google Analytics 4 is just next level complicated, because all of the language that they used, customer acquisition, user behavior, it's all gone. It's all different. So for most people, it's just impossible to use. So there's an opportunity has opened in the market here for so basically for ethical analytics is what has opened up. So there's a number of people who've been doing this for years, and those alternatives I feel are way more friendly for your average services or lead gen business website. So immediately our advice is going to fork in the road, and that first fork in the road is, are you using Google Ads? If yes, you need GA4 for Google Ads to work. So sorry, off you go and do that. If you're not using Google Ads, the options open up to you. Number one is, are you using e-commerce? And if you are, then you need to make sure that the analytics you go on to use works with e-commerce. And if you're not doing e-commerce, then you've actually got more options. So I'll run through very quickly a few of those. So there's a company called Fathom, which are doing very lightweight analytics. It's just one line of code you add to your website, and it tells you all of the stuff that analytics told you, pretty much, all the stuff that you used to look at, nice and easy. The downside of Fathom is that you need a developer to work out rules or goals. Unfortunately, they don't talk about this on their website, but the reality is you need to add a JavaScript trigger to a button to be able to track a goal.
Annoying.
So for 99% of people, sadly, Fathom just isn't going to cut it unless you're a dev, in which case I'd highly recommend it. Looks great. What I've started switching over to is a thing called Plausible, which is very similar to Fathom in the sense that it's nice and lightweight. It's one line of code. The wonderful thing about Plausible is you can add a URL success. So you can add a thank you page to your goal and say, if someone clicks a form and then they end up on the thank you page, can you count that as a conversion, please? So it's just like analytics in that sense. It's great. The one thing Plausible isn't amazing at yet is e-commerce analytics. So that's the downside of some of these new programs, is they're not great. There's Matomo, which is quite a big program and costs quite a lot of money, but that on an e-commerce level is superb if you're looking for something to go to for e-commerce. If you're using WooCommerce, then there's sort of a great tool that you can use, which is called Monster Insights, and that gets you very good data inside WooCommerce, but it also handles all of the boring conversion tracking implementation from WooCommerce and throws it at GA4 for you.
Brilliant.
So you can then use ads if you want to. So I think really the kind of takeaway is that if you are currently making business decisions based on the analytics of your website, so what people are using, what they're looking at, and what they're doing, it's not that you're not going to be able to do that. It's just that the tool that Google are launching to replace it is an absolute sledgehammer of a tool when you might not need that tool. So if you are out there, check out the links that I'll put in the description to this episode, because this is stuff that I've spent a little while researching. There's no affiliate links, or none of these people are sponsoring this episode in any way. It's just what I found and liked when I was looking around.
Yeah, I think it's such a huge, scary list of alternatives, because GA is kind of underpinned, at least in my world, like the past 5-6 years of everything that everyone's using, and the idea of using anything but Google just seemed laughable. But now I have seen, just outside of my this kind of world and circle, quite a few people recommending different ones, like, as you say, Fathom and kind of the other ones around there. I've seen them pop up on my LinkedIn feed every now and then, but I've not really investigated them that much. But I think there's two ways to look at this. Is either there's an opportunity here, and this ties in back to our broader theme of ethical marketing, really, is that you are going to lose that granular data on if you are doing a lot of kind of click-based marketing. However, if you are doing marketing that is maybe slightly squiffier and broader, that is putting your user first, this change might not impact you that much, because you're already meeting the people that you want to be attracting anyway, and therefore you're going to be slightly more resilient against that change, because you are not basing it on numbers, you are basing it on people. So I think there's going to be a interesting shift there when it does disappear, in terms of UA4 being, it's not necessarily going to be perfect. It's going to be something new. The language is all different, as you say. However, is it going to affect your business? I think it's going to really depend on your business. I don't think it's necessarily going to be a broad stroke thing where some businesses are going to struggle and some aren't. And I think if you are an e-commerce business and you are more numbers based, you probably do need to be, there's an opportunity there in investing in those technical tracking packages more so than using GA anyway. So there's definitely opportunities there. So it's one of those things that is scary at first, but I think it's not world ending.
No, but I think it's like, it's not necessarily a major thing if you start looking at it now.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
If you start looking at it when you get the email saying this closes in a week, then that's going to be quite a sharp change.
Yeah.
I mean, the GA4 interface is quite a beast to get your head around. And for most people, they don't use half of what Universal Analytics is telling them already. So the thing I found very refreshing about Plausible is there's like a fraction of what you can know from Google Analytics, but the fraction that is in there is exactly what you want to know.
Yeah,
it's where did people come from? Like, did they come from LinkedIn? Did they come from an email I sent them? What did they click on?
Yeah.
Oh, they clicked on this. So of the 50 people who arrived, 20 of them clicked that, and 2 of them filled in the form. Brilliant. That's all I want to know from Google Analytics. But now I can do that through Plausible, which loads faster, so it's better for page load speed. You don't need opt-in consent because it's anonymized data. So it's not cookie-based. It's running using Magic Script that you put in the top. So there's a lot of benefits to switching. It's just that before, it was such a ubiquitous and fantastically powerful insight tool that it didn't make sense necessarily to go elsewhere. But once that tool has disappeared from your options list, actually the others are suddenly, you're like, oh, I don't have to wade through all this data every month. I can just look on this report.
Yeah.
So I definitely encourage you to have a look around, maybe try 2 or 3 for a couple of weeks. A lot of them have free trials, so you can get in there, install it, see if it's giving you the data you need. And basically, shop around, see what your options are. There'll be links to everything we've mentioned in the description of this episode. And do let us know if you have any questions about it or thoughts, or if you are listening to this and you're thinking, I'm another analytics provider,
Yeah.
and you haven't mentioned me, then do get in touch, because I'd love to explore other options, and I'll happily amend the notes of this podcast to include anyone who does get in touch with an amazing package that I'm not yet aware of. So thanks very much, everybody, for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time.
See you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Let's cut the bullshit. We've got straight up marketing advice. You should use it.
Just drop the job.
Adam and Simon's